Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, I do ask that you like us, subscribe, maybe even support us on Patreon. All of those things help keep us on the air. Today's guest is... I have to laugh because I often talk about, or I have talked about, how we find guests for this program. And today's guest is somebody who just happened to sit next to me on an airplane.
That's true. That's so true.
And as we got to talking, I thought, I've been looking for you for a while, and here you are, right in front of me, right next to me. And I have to say that synchronicity plays a big part of what happens on this podcast. And in fact, in a future episode, I'm going to have a guest who wrote a book about super synchronicity, how she can train you to enhance the number of synchronicities in your life and to recognize them and take advantage of them. But that's not today's guest.
Yeah.
Today's guest is Tad Brinkerhoff. He's the Assistant Dean for Master's Programs at the Tepper School of Business. That's at Carnegie Mellon University here in Pittsburgh. And he spent the last 24 years in business school administration at schools like Purdue University and the University of Missouri. Prior to working in higher ed, Tad worked in the corporate world in the automotive and software industries. He earned his bachelor's degree in Spanish from Southern Utah University and his MBA from Brigham Young University. He spent 2 years in Ecuador and 4 years in Japan and enjoys international travel and languages. He's married to a nurse. They've got 5 grown children. And he likes to play the piano and cello and eat Thai food. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot there as we talked on the plane that it just felt like we had in common. I love Thai food too.
Oh, good. Some of the best.
So Tad, is, as you know from watching a few of the episodes, the way we do this is I'm going to ask you to relate your spiritual journey from childhood until now. And then we'll get into some questions. Okay?
Sounds great.
All right.
And it was fun to sit by you on the plane. When you fly Southwest, you never know who you're going to sit by or where you're going to sit. So it was fun to hear about you and the amazing things you've done. And you gave me a lot of things to think about since we met, talking about what is a spiritual journey. And so that's been a positive thing for me. As I've thought about it, just my own life, I really had to back up. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I had to ask myself, well, why am I a member of this particular church, and why do I believe what I believe? And it really goes back to my ancestors. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was organized in upstate New York in the early 1800s, and I had my third great-grandfather, his name was James Brinkerhoff. He was a farmer in that area in the early 1800s, and he came in contact with missionaries from the church and ended up joining the church. And as the church moved from New York to Ohio to Illinois, he went with them. He eventually settled in Utah. The church moved to the state of Utah. And he lived in several places, helped settle several areas of the state of Utah, and was very devout member of the church. And most of, if not all of my ancestors have similar stories. They converted either in England or France. We have relatives from Sweden and Wales and Denmark and Turkey that converted and then settled in Utah. And so that's kind of the interesting part of my heritage. Not all of my relatives have chosen to stay within the church or comply with the teachings of the church. But my parents were fairly devout, and the church is one that it's not one that you just go to church on Sunday and be done. It's a very much a commitment and a lifestyle, and I embraced that early on. But I have thought, when you talked about the journey, I mean, there's sometimes bumps in the road, and where you question your faith and you wonder, why do I believe what I do, and do I really believe what I do? And I think my first faith crises was when I was a child. Really, I had a grandfather who lived on a farm near us, and we loved him, and he, very young, contracted leukemia. And I remember we began to pray for him every day. And I remember thinking, you go to Sunday school and you read in the Bible that if you ask for something, you should receive it. And so in my childlike faith, I guess, I took that at face value. Well, eventually my grandfather died, and I was very disappointed. And I thought, wait, is the Bible accurate? Is it really telling me what is true? Because I asked for something and my grandfather didn't live. But as I've grown through that experience, you learn that we're all going to die, and sometimes we don't get what we want, and maybe that's okay, and that maybe that's part of God's plan for us as we learn here in this mortal experience. So that was something that it took me a while to get over. Later, in our church, we have a missionary program where young men and women are invited to serve as missionaries anywhere in the world. And I chose to do that as well. So at 19, you basically send in an application, and then you're assigned, and you can go anywhere. I was assigned to Guayaquil, Ecuador. I had taken a little Spanish, and this is a just 2-year commitment. It's not a 2-week thing. You're there for 2 years. You learn the language, but it's something that it's something that we do voluntarily. We pay for our own way there. I'd worked as a kid raising money so that I could pay for the experience. But once I got there, I was confronted with all the cultural. You're not by yourself, but you really don't know people. You're assigned a companion, and there's a mission president that oversees you. But you're thrust into. I was in some very poor areas. I saw poverty. I saw starvation. I saw homes that, where there were children that were beat. And it was very unsettling for me. And at the same time, I'm trying to teach others about the goodness of Christ and the impact that he can have in our lives. And so early on in that experience, I had to ask myself, do I really believe what I'm teaching? Right. And I think for me, that was a significant time in my life where I had to decide, do I really believe? And I need to find out. And I needed those spiritual confirmations, which eventually came after a lot of prayer and fasting and seeking. But the experience really changed my life in a dramatic way. I came back with deeper sympathy for people who suffer, a realization that we're all children of God, that we're extremely blessed, those of us who are in the United States, and we have an obligation to help others. And so that was just a wonderful, life-changing experience for me, not only intellectually, but I think spiritually as well. Yeah. And you make friends. I mean, you come from completely different backgrounds, and I was just on the phone yesterday with some people that I knew, and I've gone back many, many times to visit.
So how many years has it been since you were there?
It's been 40 years. Yeah. It's been a long time.
Well, those are nice friendships when they last that long.
Yeah. And thank goodness for technology.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of miraculous in a way, because I mean, here I'm this white man from a small rural town in Utah, and I've really connected with people who live in cane houses and maybe don't have a lot of education, but I think there's that spiritual connection and also the human connection. And so it's been something that's been wonderful for me to experience. After I came back, went to college, international business, that experience really opened the world up to me. And so I decided I wanted to study and work in international business. And so after college, I decided I wanted to learn another language. So I accepted a job with the Japanese government in Japan. Again, not knowing the language, but having gone through the cultural adaptation process. And was very fortunate when you talk about coincidental incidences and people that you meet. I was assigned by the government to work in a small town north of Hiroshima, Japan, in a rural area. I was assigned to a city office to do international relations and work in education. And my boss at the Board of Education actually was a Buddhist priest. So he lived in a temple. It was built in the around 1000 AD, and he was I think he was the 21st line in his priest family. So he could go back 21 generations, and priests had lived in that temple, and I really got a fascinating introduction to Buddhism and Eastern ways of thinking. And I wasn't married at the time, and so it was just me and his wife, and his family were just exceptionally kind. They invited me to come eat dinner with them every night. So for 2 years, I was in their home,
Wow.
being fed by them. And then he would have meetings in Kyoto, Japan, which was a decent, probably 8 hours away. But he would go to the main temple in Kyoto probably every 3 months, and he invited me to go with him. And so I would go in the temple and sit with the other priests while he was in his meetings. And I wasn't very good at meditation. I think I have attention deficit disorder or something, but I tried. But it was a great experience for me. I went to all the ceremonies in the temple locally when there was a death, or they just included me. And I was really touched by that. Being it's a little emotional for me. Being near where the bomb was dropped, I always wondered how I would be received, because it was my country who dropped the bomb and created so much devastation. And I remember asking my boss's mother. Ironically, my boss, he was born on the same day, same year as my dad, and he became like my Japanese father. And I asked his mother one time, I said, why are the people here so kind to me in America, and they don't know me? And she said something that has always stuck with me. She said, you Americans, after the war, we thought that you would come in and just decimate us. But she said, instead, you fed us. And she said that was, we were taken aback by that. And that, to me, that was a gesture of why humanity, and with malice towards none, that approach of forgiveness is so important as we deal with each other individually, as we deal with each other as nations. That it's, I think it's critical that we implement those values of forgiveness and kindness and love. And it does make a difference in how we treat each other one-on-one or as nation to nation. So it reminded me of Abraham Lincoln's approach to the South after the Civil War, et cetera. So that was a transformative experience for me, in experiencing a different viewpoint, a different religion, but really seeing the humanity that we all have and we all share, or we can share if we choose to.
So this whole concept of forgiveness, which is important in all of our lives, typically the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. And what I have found is that it needs to start there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for us to truly be able to forgive, and then to take it to the next level and understand that there is nothing to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
As you've said, we're all children of God, and therefore there is nothing to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can arrive at that point, then forgiveness is so easy.
Yeah.
But to start with yourself, if you can forgive yourself,
Right.
for all the mistakes you've made, all the problems you've had, and just say,
Right. Like, yeah, and I think that also is aligned with loving ourselves as well. Before we can love others, we have to love ourselves.
Right.
And I think part of, for me, and going along with that spiritual journey, is realizing why we're here. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to make mistakes. But the goal is to be better and improve.
Yeah.
So learn from the past and move forward.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I know my whole confrontation with forgiveness didn't happen until I was in my 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to decide if I was going to forgive my father for the many things that he had no idea that he needed forgiven for.
Yeah.
He didn't think so.
Yeah.
But I had to go through a process of, okay, all those things from childhood, you know, they were learning experiences. And, you know, he doesn't need my forgiveness, but I need to forgive him to move on.
Right. Letting it go.
With my life and our relationship. And once I did that, and we ended up with a beautiful relationship after that.
That's nice.
I understood that forgiving someone else is really taking toxicity out of your system. Mm-hmm. and freeing yourself.
I believe that.
Yeah, it really has nothing to do with that other person. It has to do with you,
right?
And freeing up all that stuff that you hold.
Yeah, and that's so hard though, right?
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes it feels good to hang on to that. You feel vindicated or justified, and
right.
You feel like I'm letting someone get away with something that maybe they shouldn't, but in reality, we've all offended others, and we all are in need of some grace.
It's just like that saying, what's more important, being right or showing love?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I've heard that, or I've heard it say, is it important to be right or be happy? And so I agree. But sometimes as a human, we feel like it just feels good to hang on in some ways.
Yeah.
But it's not productive. You're right. So.
Yeah. So you have 5 grown children.
Right.
Have they all followed the faith path with the same church, or
they have?
What's happened there?
They have. We tried to be. How do I say this? We tried to let our children choose their own path, and sometimes that's scary. 4 of the 5 have served missions. One was in Taiwan, one was in Thailand, one was in California, and one was in Puerto Rico. We did have one child who, for a period of time, really didn't want anything to do with the church. And that was hard. That was hard for me because the way, I'm like, this is a lifestyle. This is a framework that I think can make your life better. And because I've experienced that, I feel like it's really made me happy, given me ways to deal with challenges in life, and he didn't want to pursue that, and we had to accept that. I mean, it was his choice, right? And he has since he left for a while, and he's chosen to come back, which makes us happy. But you love them no matter what, right? You
Yeah,
have to love
sure.
your children regardless of the choices that they make, just like God loves us unconditionally,
Right.
regardless of the choices we make. But as a parent, sometimes you see them making choices that you think are going to cause problems. And it's hard, but that's part of the learning process.
Yeah.
And my wife's much better at it than I am in terms of total and unconditional acceptance.
Uh-huh.
So
Mothers are like that.
yes, they are. They always call
Yeah.
my wife first. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, I've found that over the years that, the only thing that beats a mother's love is a grandmother's love.
yeah,
When it
I
comes
agree
to
with that. I agree
unconditional.
with that. So true.
Yeah. Uh, uh, there is, and when I did the interview with John Dye, who's also a Mormon, he made reference to the fact that all religions have something in the past that's sort of a dark point that has caused people to point and say, no, that's not for me because this happened
Right.
in the history of that church. And I mean, most recently it's been the Catholic Church where people have pointed and said, well,
Right.
Because of the sexual abuse, I could never be a Catholic.
Right.
So when it comes to what went on generations ago in New York, and why the Mormons up there were eventually chastised, and I don't know if they were kicked out of New York, but they were told that they weren't welcome.
They weren't kicked out of New York. Missouri, there was an extermination order. They were ordered to leave the state. So that's when they left Missouri and they went to Illinois.
Yeah.
And then they stayed for a period of time. And then there was enough strife and conflict that they chose to leave the United States. So they could feel like they could practice their religion in the way they wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not a historian, I'm not an expert necessarily, but I think there were two big issues. One was polygamy and one was slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the members of the church were anti-slavery.
Yeah.
And that created, it was pre-Civil War, and that created, especially in Missouri, there was the Kansas-Missouri non-slave state, and they tended to vote in blocks.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, it's not my area of expertise, but from what I've read, and it was a very politically charged environment.
Yeah.
To the point that they chose to leave the U.S. for a period of time.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't really aware of that part of the history. I mean, I was aware of the New York situation, but not Missouri. Okay.
Yeah, I think New York, the violence I think was particularly bad in Missouri, and we lived there in Missouri for 6 years, and so we learned some of the history and we saw some of the historical sites, and there was, in fact, on the books until I think 20 years ago, there was a law on the books that if you shot a Mormon, you could receive a bounty from the state.
Oh.
And obviously that wasn't enacted in the last 100 years, but back in the day, it was such when the extermination order was issued. So they've since rescinded that, but
wow.
Yeah.
Let's hope they rescinded it.
Yeah, they did. I think it was about 20 years ago. I think just before we moved to Missouri.
Recent. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those laws that were on the books.
Yeah.
And
nobody took it seriously at that point.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's been fun to read the journals of many of my ancestors who, some of them were in Missouri, some got kicked out, some went to Nauvoo, and then they left after a period of time.
So you've had access to those journals.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
That would be exciting.
So, I mean, part of our church culture is family history.
Uh-huh.
So we have a program that I mean, I love history myself, although I'm not an expert, but we have the opportunity to do family research. So I did 23andMe, but it was like, this is nothing new because I already knew where my ancestors came from. I had a grandmother from Turkey and then all over Europe. But we also, like, there's a volunteer program where we help index records, historical family records. Mm-hmm. So that goes into this database of billions and billions of people so that you can trace your family, your family connections. And so you learn and you see historical records from your ancestors, and that's been interesting for me.
Okay.
So
this is foremost in my mind right now because just yesterday I interviewed somebody who's an evangelist for the Catholic Church and has written a book about how to evangelize for your religion.
Yeah.
And I found that curious. I guess my interest was out of curiosity. Because there's I guess the data shows that just membership in religions has declined rapidly, not just across this country, but across the world.
Right.
So do you see it as part of your mission or part of your culture to evangelize? Because that seems to me, I guess, part of these missions that go out when you're in your youth. But do you carry that with you then into your adulthood and feel that that's part of what you should be doing?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're taught, and I believe that we have something valuable that can be shared. Christ taught us to teach all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Ghost. That directive from the Bible. So I think that's part of it. I also think part of it is how can we share teachings and beliefs that will help you in your personal life. So we do have, for the young adults, we do have an active missionary program. In my particular congregation here in Pittsburgh, and congregations across the world with the church, we're actively organized. We have it's called Ministering Program. And I'm assigned 4 or 5 families that I just check in on. And I have families that have different needs. Some have maybe financial needs. Some maybe have spiritual needs. And it's not necessarily evangelizing, but it's a way for us to look after what we consider our brothers and sisters. And then when I retire, my wife and I will serve missions. My wife served in Thailand. I served in Ecuador. Her brothers and sisters served. Her parents served in Africa and Malaysia and Canada. And the nice thing I like about the missionary program now, it's as a senior, what we call senior missionaries, it can be a wide variety of things. So my wife's a nurse. She wants to do health care in underdeveloped countries. Yeah. She would love to go back to Thailand. I'm involved in education. I would love to promote educational programs for the underserved. How can I help people from developing countries access the higher education system we have here in the United States?
Yeah.
So that's our goal. It's what we want to do when we finish our professional lives. And both of our parents have done that, and so there's a history and an opportunity to do that. So some people say when I retire, I'm just going to go to Florida and golf. That's not our future. We'll be overseas for a period of 18 months to 2 years. So
Yeah, there's an awful lot to be said for that. I know when my wife retired, and I retired before that.
Yeah.
Not that I'm really retired, but
You are not.
we did go to Rwanda, and we expected that to at least be a year working with a missionary there. It ended up just 9 months because we had to get back to sell our house.
Yeah.
But that was one of those things where we stripped down bare in terms of selling all our possessions as much as we could, selling our cars, putting our house on the market, and the freedom of getting rid of stuff and things that you'd accumulated over a lifetime. You just say, I don't need any of this stuff.
So true. In the moment, sometimes it's hard to get rid of, but you're right. I remember you showing me pictures on the plane, and I was so impressed that you were willing to do that, because sometimes it's hard to give away our stuff. And you were there twice, right?
Yeah, the first time we just I took a group from our church, so it was just 10 of us, and it was just for 8 days.
Nice.
But when we got back, we just said, okay, we got to go back for a longer period. There's just so much good work that we could do that would contribute.
Right.
And, you know, I get it with your wife being a nurse. I mean, you have those skills. Those skills don't go away.
Right. Right.
You know, and where did you get those gifts? Well, they're gifts from God.
That's so true.
So it's your job to continue to use them.
Yep, I agree. So hopefully that's our plan.
Yeah,
we want to be like you.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's I get it. I really do. Okay, there are things that I'm curious about. For instance, piano and cello. So how do you express yourself in that way? Or, you know, do you get to do that very often, and in what context?
I do in most piano. I mean, my mom started me when I was 5. My parents were not musical, but I think they noticed early on that I had an interest in music. And so I had a wonderful piano teacher for most of from 8 years old until I went on my mission to Ecuador. And I was able to use music both professionally, but also in church a lot. So, and I still do that. And when I was in Ecuador, I taught a lot of music. When I was in Japan, I taught music as well. And so it's just something that I really enjoy. I played football in high school, and my piano teacher, she'd always say, you're going to play the piano a little longer than you're going to play football. So put some more time. She said, not to burst your bubble, you're not going to play in the NFL. And I'm like, at the time, I'm like, really? And she was absolutely right. So here I'm in my 50s, and I'm not playing football, but I am still using the things I learned. She also taught me organ, so I play organ at church. I played the cello in some community orchestras. And for me, it's a creative outlet. It's a way to express myself. It's a way to reduce stress. And it's been interesting because all our kids have picked it up as well. I think just we didn't force them, but they just being around it, they've enjoyed it. So it's been a gift.
Another thing, you have gifts and you share them, and that's wonderful.
Yep.
It really is. Yeah. I have a connection to the cello just in that I spent a little time in Korea in the service and lived in this local village. And I knew a woman who played the cello.
A Korean woman?
Yeah. Oh. And it was just, I had never been familiar with the cello up until that point.
Yeah.
And to hear the beauty of the music that that can come from that is it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
And that whole concept around vibration and frequency has always fascinated me. But, I recently, it was when I was in Scottsdale at that conference, I met you on the plane on my way to the conference there. They showed a demonstration of a guitar string and it vibrating, and then another guitar put in close proximity, and the same string on that guitar began to vibrate.
Really?
And then they stopped the vibration of the string on the first guitar, and the second guitar string kept vibrating.
Really? Interesting.
And then they brought the guitar that wasn't vibrating back into proximity, and it started to vibrate again.
Huh.
And this was to demonstrate the whole sense of the effect that we have on people. And often we're not aware of it because of our DNA. And when we touch somebody or touch an object, we leave some of our DNA behind. Now, I guess many of us know that from watching CSI on television and, how they can go in and, not just get fingerprints, but they pick up your DNA and then they can match it and decide you're the criminal. But this was to show, I guess, part of what we've called the butterfly effect, that, you touch somebody, they touch somebody else, and they touch somebody else. And your DNA is out there in places that you have no idea.
Yeah.
But there's a piece of your consciousness that goes with that DNA.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, my piano teacher, before she died, I had a conversation with her and just said, I got through college by teaching piano lessons. I've taught piano in Ecuador. I've taught piano in Japan. I've taught a lot of people in church. All my kids play. So this one woman, her name was Evelyn Jones, she impacted hundreds.
Right.
Because she was patient, she was kind. I hated piano initially, but she knew who I was and knew what I liked and reached me in that regard. And so that's so true. That one act ripples. Yeah. We don't see it at the time is the challenge. We just have to have faith that it's going to work out. And your podcast is a great example of that. Something that you've initiated, and I'm sure it's affected a lot of people you don't even know about.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But it's all about faith. I mean, it's that faith we have when we plant a seed in the ground, especially if it's an acorn, because that oak tree, you're going to be long dead before it reaches maturity.
Right.
But it's faith that seed is going to do something wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's the same feeling that I had on the plane, I guess, that I love your energy and I share it. It's love. So
yeah, that's so true.
Call it what it is.
I'm glad you let me sit by you because it was a middle seat. I don't know. Some people, they tell you this seat's taken and you didn't do that. So
well, it was funny because I had a conversation. I was on the window seat and I had a conversation with the woman on the aisle seat, and I said, why don't you put your purse on that center seat, and then nobody will sit here and we'll be able to spread out. And we laughed about that. And then you showed up. I'd let them sit here.
I appreciate that.
Well, and it is funny because on Southwest, and I didn't know this, so maybe many people don't know it, is that I bought a first class ticket.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Southwest.
Well, I didn't either. But when they gave me that option, I thought, okay, I've never ridden in first class before,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna get a first class seat.
Yeah.
Well, a first class seat on Southwest just means that you get on the plane first, so you get to choose your seat.
Yeah.
But you sat right next to me and didn't pay the first class price.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And that amazed me, but it did teach me a lesson.
Yeah. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah. We're all the same. Nobody's better than anybody else.
Yeah, it's true.
No matter what you think or how much you pay. Okay, I'm just curious, I guess, about your thinking about going to college. Because I would think that Brigham Young University would have been your first choice for undergraduate as well as graduate. And how did it end up, with that choice that you made in Southern Utah? That's
interesting. So the Southern Utah University was across the street from where I grew up, but I did want to go to BYU as an undergraduate. I was the student body president in my high school, and so I had a scholarship to any university in the state of Utah, including BYU. And I had planned on going to BYU, but as I looked at the cost, I had the scholarship, but I had money saved for my mission. I think I had about $2,000 or $3,000 saved, and it came time to making the choice for a university. I either was going to have to dip into my mission fund to pay for my housing, or stay local and and go for free and have free housing, living with my folks. And it was a really hard decision. But the mission experience was important enough for me, and I wanted to pay for it, that I chose to stay at Southern Utah, which is a smaller state school. I went a year, and then I went on my mission and came back and finished. And it really worked out well. I had some incredible experiences as an undergrad at Southern Utah University, academically, spiritually, socially, and then ended up going to BYU for my master's.
Yeah.
So I got the BYU experience, and I ended up working at BYU. I worked after my first foray in higher ed was at BYU, and enjoyed it. And so it all worked out.
Yeah.
God, in the end, God will make it right. So at the time I was quite disappointed, but I did have a wonderful experience at BYU later, as well as a different undergraduate experience.
Yeah, that's what they say about prayer. God will always answer, but you may not like the answer.
Or the timing, right? Yeah, that's true. But I think the one thing I've been blessed with is I can look back in my life and I can see God's hand in my life. It's like, oh, okay, now I can see it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to Ecuador on my mission. I wanted to go actually to Asia. And I was disappointed. And now I look back and I'm like, that was exactly where I needed to be. But I couldn't see that at the time.
Right.
So,
yeah. Okay, I am just about out of questions. Are you out of answers? Was there anything else
I do want to share just
out?
one experience that I think contributed to my spiritual journey. My wife is the youngest of 8 children. She had wonderful parents, and towards the end of my mother-in-law's life, she developed dementia, and so we had moved to Indiana. I was at Purdue at the time, and we invited them to come live with us. And at first it was difficult. We had to buy a bigger house. She had dementia. My father-in-law was there. And eventually, over a 5-year period of time, They both passed away in our home, but that experience for our kids and for my wife and myself, I think added another layer of in our spiritual journey about the process of death, the end of life care, how we care for each other, that experience, the peace we felt when they both passed. In fact, it's my father-in-law's 100th birthday today, which is kind of ironic. We're going to have a little celebration, but that also helped solidify some things in my mind about the purpose of life, how we transition. This isn't the end. So that, I think that experience, looking back, although sometimes it was challenging, it was a huge blessing, not only for me, but for my kids and my wife. So I think it's helped prepare me for what's next, after this life, and how to make that transition successfully.
So was that, because you describe it as being a good experience for you and your kids, does that mean that you were able to have a discussion with your kids afterwards to know that they came to pretty much the same understanding that you did?
We've had lots of conversations about that. I mean, during the experience and after the experience, because we remember them fondly. We have conversations. My youngest daughter, who just came back from her mission in Puerto Rico, we called her the pharmacist, because she would organize all of Grandpa's pills. At age 14 and 12, she was putting all his pills together, and now she wants to go into nursing and medicine. So we've talked about the impact it had, and I think they all agree that sometimes we couldn't go on family vacations, but in the end it was worth it, because our kids got that relationship with their grandparents that they'll have forever.
Yeah.
So
right. Okay, so the big question is, what is your understanding of what happens after we die?
I believe that the spirit continues to, I believe the soul is spirit and a body. And when we die, our spirit leaves our body, and we go to be with God and wait the time when eventually we'll be resurrected, and be able to live eternally. And I think that's not just that teaching, but also the fact that we can be together as families is paramount in my beliefs, that the family relationships continue on beyond the grave, and that we have the opportunity to be together. And that's why family is so important for us. That is why family history is so important. I want to know, like my third great grandfather, James Brinkerhoff, I can't wait to meet him someday and thank him for the choices that he made that have helped my life. So that's a core belief of who I am, and it's a core belief that I've received from being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
So I'm not afraid. Having seen my in-laws pass through it, I'm not afraid of death. In fact, I'm not anticipating it, but I think it will be part of the growth journey that we have as human beings and children of God, the opportunity to return and to be with him.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah. Okay. At this point in our podcast, because we're nearing the end of it, I always give the guest an opportunity. In fact, I insist on it, that you leave the audience with a few words of wisdom.
So as I've watched the other podcasts, I've thought about that, and I feel like I'm someone who's continually learning. So giving words of wisdom maybe doesn't mean I figured everything out. I'm still trying to figure things out and trying to understand and trying to learn and grow. But I mean, there's some things that have taught me my experiences in Ecuador and Japan and living different places, that kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about the basic humanity of all of us, that we all deserve to be respected and loved, regardless if we're the CEO of a company or if we're in the custodial pool, that we all are children of God. We all have divine potential, and we all deserve to be respected. And my goal is to, hopefully, I'm not perfect, but to try and treat others in that way, that they are children of God. They are my brothers and sisters, and they deserve to be treated appropriately. The other goal that I have, I don't know if it's a word of wisdom or not, but I strive to trust God and let him work in my life and trust the process, and just let God prevail in my life. That's a constant challenge, but it's something I strive to do every day. And I find when I do that, I'm a much happier person. I'm more successful in the things that I want to accomplish. And not worry about things that really don't have eternal consequences. You know, as I watch my in-laws slip away, leave everything behind, what remained were the memories and the love and the feelings that we had, not the car, not the house, not anything really. So it was I've been blessed with some great life lessons, which I'm happy to continue to explore. So, and I appreciate you kind of jogging my memory and helping me to think differently as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
I know that when I was first asked a few years ago to describe my spiritual journey, it was really eye-opening to go back and say, oh, I can connect the dots. This happened and this happened. And, oh, that's why I think that way now, because this person was in my life, or this book came into my life. And it's an interesting experience. I recommend it to everybody out there. Think about your own spiritual journey. Well, as always, audience, consider what you've heard. Incorporate into your life those things that resonate with you. The rest on the shelf until you're ready to deal with them. Until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.